Good morning, folks. Let's take a look today at the reduce function, the new lambda function known as reduce. Let's take a look and see how this works. Let's first of all start with a set of numbers. Let's use the sequence function. Let's start down here in A4. This is going to be equal to sequence. And what we'll do is we'll do a sequence of 10. And what that's going to do is create an array 1 through 10 for us. Now, what the reduce function does is take a starting value and a secondary value and then perform a function on it. So for instance, what it would do is reduce this set of numbers here to a single value. And in this case, it would be something like this. This would be equal to 0. Let's start at 0, and then we're going to add this, and that's going to be 1. And then our next value would be to take this number. This would be that become our starting value, and then this would be the value we would go ahead and add. And I could build this formula like this and drag this down. And I could see that if I reduce the sum of these numbers to 55, and that's what reduce is going to do. It's going to apply a value of what they call the accumulator, and then the current value. So this is going to start at 0. Then we're going to add this. We get 1. Then we're going to start at 1. We're going to add this. We're going to get 3, and so forth. So let's see how we could build a reduce function to come up with this same issue. So let's look at reduce, equals reduce, and let's open up and see what it says. So you start with an initial value. We're going to start at 1. And then the next step is the array. Well, in this case, this is going to be our array. Our array is going to be that, and I think just to leave it open-ended, I'll go A4 to A. Then the next step is the lambda. So we would type lambda, and well, we have to LAMB and DA lambda. There's our lambda. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong little button there. Lambda. And then the lambda, if we looked back at reduce, reduce tells us that it talks about you have to have 3 values. Your starting value, or the lambda has to have a total, a value, and a total plus the value. So what we're going to do is name the starting value S, and the next value N, and the function we'll perform on that is S plus N. And that should give us, and one thing to be careful of when you're creating these things, if this is wanting to convert this to a formula, so I'm going to have to end that, or if I hit the tab key, it's going to put in this N function for me, which I do not want. So this, we can see, this reduce function gives us this value. Now, this was our sequence of 10. What if we do a sequence of 20? And then you'll see this would have to be copied down, this formula, and you'll see that's 210, but our reduce function gives us the sum of this, each one of these numbers sequentially, of 210. We could simplify this, and what I'm going to do is put in in this lambda, I'm going to, right now I'm putting in A4 to A. Well, A4 to A is built up of this sequence. So I think what I'll do is let's just put a number here, 20, And then let's go ahead and build this sequence, not based on 20, but we'll build this sequence based on A1. And then if I change this to 10, or I change this to 5, I'm building that as we go. So what I could do to build this reduce function is take this formula here, my sequence formula based on A1. Let's go ahead and copy that. And let's come here and let's, instead of A4 to A, let's put in our sequence. And we get 15. So now with a single formula, if I change this to 2, or change this to 200, you'll see I get this total number here. If I'd have to add enough rows in to show you, but if I were to go ahead and select all of this, you'll see that that number is 20,110, or 20,100. So you can see very quickly that we can come up with a sum of a sequence of numbers. In this way, with the reduce function, a single formula, I can find out what the value is of a row of numbers. And that could be handy under certain circumstances. If I want to know what is the sum of a column of numbers that is, 1 through 50, 1 through 40, and so forth, and I can see that those numbers are going to show up for me with a single reduce function and a lambda. One of the nice things about this is that I could save this function as a named function. And let's take a look at that. I have already done that, and I've called it SumNum. And what it does, and let me go ahead, you can see that I've saved it as a named function, and I'm going to edit that and show you what it looks like. So I've called it SumNum, and I've defined it here. It reduces the sum of a number, example 7 equals 1 plus 2 plus 3 through 7. And the argument that you're going to use is a cell. And we're going to put in the formula, which we had just built, reduce, starting at 0. We're going to sequence the cell. We're going to apply the lambda, the start, the next, the start plus next. That's what this function, named function, does. And I added some other details in here. And you can see that's what that function does. So now that I have a named function, I can simply apply that to equals my new function SumNum. And you can see from what we wrote and created on our named function, the SumNum cell, SumNum example A1, and it tells us what it's going to do. It tells us the formula definition, and the cell is just a single value. So we can select A1, and with a single formula called SumNum, I can now very quickly get an answer to the value. In fact, let's go ahead and drag this right over here. There's my value. There's my SumNum function. The other great thing about this is that we could use the SumNum function inside another named function. Let's take a look at that. So taking a look at this, this is our sequence of A1, and we have 1 through 20, and this is our formula that we handcrafted to show how this works. Let's go ahead and get rid of this data. We don't need this anymore. And this was a sample of our SumNum. We're using that same right here, so we can get rid of that. Let's see what it would look like to take a value and apply SumNum within another function. So let's do this equals by row. So let's do equal by row. And this would be our function. We'll go ahead and do this. We'll just do A4 colon A, so we'll leave it open-ended. That's our by row function, and our lambda on this is going to be applied to each row. So our lambda is going to be, we have to start with the value of the row. I'm just going to use an R for the value of the row. And then we apply a formula. And the formula I'm going to apply is SUMNUM. I've created the formula called SUMNUM, and we're going to apply that to each row. And we'll go ahead and close that out, and that should do it. So now you could see I am applying a named function inside my lambda, and here I can see that I'm getting 1 through 210, and if I change this to 30, I can see that value. So this is my 485, or 465, that's my SUMNUM. Here I'm applying a by row lambda and using SUMNUM. In this case, we've got an issue with all these numbers happening because we have that open-ended value. So we would want to probably wrap that in an if error so that we could do away with that. So our lambda SUMNUM, I believe our if error is going to go here. If error, better spell that correctly. If error SUMNUM, then we're going to have a value if there's an error, and that should take care of that. Let's see if that does. Yes. So when we apply that if error inside of our lambda, now when we change this value here, you can see we're creating the sequence of A1, and then by row I'm able to look and see what is the sum of just each set of numbers, 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, and so forth, whereas my SUMNUM right here is just the value of this number here and the reduce function, because that's what the SUMNUM is. So great new stuff with the lambdas and the by rows, and in this case we're looking at reduce.